This passage can be found on page 1241 of your church Bibles. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour the child the minute it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter. And the child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient snake called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accusers of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, have been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Yeah, please do. Thanks, Erica. Please keep it open. If you've not got it open, why not turn to it? It'll help concentrate. Page 1241. In Revelation, Revelation is weird, isn't it? The book of Revelation is just weird. I mean, it starts simply enough. There's a few letters to different churches, and we can cope with that. And then there's a vision of a throne, of God on his throne and everything surrounded. We can cope with that. But then it just gets weirder and weirder until we get stuff like that. It's plain odd, isn't it? Well, how do we understand it? I said in previous weeks, one of the keys is understanding the pictures here. There's lots of pictures, and they're Old Testament pictures. This is the New Testament after Jesus. Before Jesus, the Old Testament is full of pictures, and when you get those, it's like cracking a code, and so much of this makes sense. But the other thing to understand is it's not one long story. You get the impression when you start reading, after you've seen the throne, things happen, and then weirder and weirder, and it just goes on, and you just think this is bizarre. It's not one long story. It actually goes over the same ground again and again from different perspectives, different camera angles, if you like, different versions of the story from whoever's filming it. The best illustration I have is of an onion. Jason, can you just turn me down slightly? I just feel I'm booming. Is that okay? Can people still hear me? Yeah, okay. An onion. You know when you've got an onion, you peel off the outer skin, and what do you find? Another layer. And if you cut that and peel that layer off, what do you find? Another layer. And it keeps going on like that, doesn't it? Well, I think that's what Revelation is like. You see a layer. It describes the world in, fantastical language, but it describes the world as it was and it is now and will be of a messed up world. And then it says, but Jesus is coming, he'll judge and sort it out. And that's one layer. And then you go back and you cover the same ground again, another layer. This is what the world's like. It's messed up. Jesus is coming to judge and sort it out. It'll be better. It'll be perfect under him. And then you do the same again. So we started a few weeks ago. We had this scroll, a sort of like history of God's plan of the world. It was all sealed shut, and it was opened up, and you got this amazing picture of the world and all a mess of people hurting and killing one another. But then there's God's people secure because of Jesus, and he returns. And then you get another picture of trumpets that David's already mentioned. 7 trumpets, and it's the messed up world and all the state of the world. Well, it's disasters and pain, but there's Jesus and there's God's people, and they're secured. And then it comes again. Here's another layer of the onion, another layer of what's going on in what we're looking at today. This time, we start again at the beginning, how the world is messed up, what it's like before we see Jesus returning. So, there we go, my clicker is working. Today's whole talk is about God's war with evil. We're going to cover chapters 12, 13, 14 and 15. We're just going to fly over and just dip into little bits and just get a sense of what's going on. And it starts with the bit we've read. A woman, a child, and a dragon. We've got to work out, here's the pictures, we've got to work out who is the woman, who is the child, who is the dragon. Well, let's start with the child. I reckon we can do this, can't we? Verse 5, she gave birth to a son. Unto us a son was born, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. Well, a scepter is what a king has, or a queen. It's the sign that they're in charge, the crown and the scepter, they rule. But this is a king not just of one country, it's all nations, everywhere. This is the king of kings. It doesn't take much work to work out a son being born, the king. It's Jesus. He, in Revelation, is on God's throne. He's ruling. So we know this son is Jesus. The dragon? Well, that's even easier. It actually tells us in verse 9, the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. So, we've got Jesus, the son, and a dragon, a serpent, the devil, in picture language. Who's the woman? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? If she gives birth to Jesus, this is Mary. It's not. I know it seems like that when we read it, because we know Mary is Jesus' mum. But actually, when you read on, and I hope to explain this as I go along, it makes sense more to realise the woman is the church. Because in Revelation, the church is called a female. There's a wedding at the end where Jesus marries his bride. The church, the woman. Well, that's a bit weird if it's his mum, but anyway, it's just picture language. Here it's the church sort of, for generations after generation, eventually sort of gives birth to Jesus. From the church, from God's people, one special person is born, Jesus. And it makes more sense if we read it not just as one woman, not as Mary, but as the whole church. So I'm going to change the heading. We've got God's war with evil, a woman, a child, and dragon. I'm going to update it. It is the church, Jesus, and Satan. So there's a battle. The church and Jesus, Satan. Sorry, by doing that makes it look like you're all the church over and this side is all evil. Apologies about that by dividing sides, but it's just up here, not you guys. Sorry, church and, well, okay. To understand this is another picture we've got to get our heads around. We've got to go back and think right at the beginning of the world. Why is the world messed up? The world, when God created it, according to Genesis, the first book of the Bible, the world was beautiful and perfect. There was harmony, there was peace, there was love. People were friends with God and friends with each other. It was perfection. But then Satan, the devil, turned up, the serpent. Again, it's picture language of the devil, and just sort of whispers to the woman, did God say you couldn't eat that fruit over there or touch that fruit over there? Well, God did say, look, he said, you've got this whole universe. There's one rule here. Don't eat that fruit. It's like God saying, I'm in charge. This is my universe. I'm not going to be heavy on rules. Just one rule. Don't do that. And then you know that I'm in charge. I rule. And the serpent, the Satan tempts the woman. You can touch that. You can eat that. It's fine. Trust me. It'll be fine. And she does trust him. She eats. And the consequences are, instead of God being in charge and making the rules, the woman is in charge, or the man is in charge, the people are in charge, the serpent's in charge. It's like, God, get off your throne. We're in charge here. We'll make the rules, and chaos results. The world doesn't run as it should. It should be God in charge, but others are in charge now, and chaos results. That describes the beginning of the chaos in our world. Our world is chaos because people are still doing the same, pushing God off the throne and saying, I'm in charge, and chaos results. Now, there are consequences for the serpent, for Adam and Eve, the first people. The consequences are, for the woman, childbirth becomes painful. So Genesis, God says, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labour you will give birth to children. I think the thing is, God said to people, go and fill the earth with, populate the world, fill the world. Well, at the moment when they're doing that, it is painful to remind them they've messed up. God gives the people food to eat, but now for the man, he's got to work hard. Food's not just on tap, as it were. He's got to work hard and toil the ground. The world is messed up and there are consequences. And for the serpent, the devil, God says to him, I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers. In other words, there'll be snakes and people won't get on. I know there's some people who like to hug a snake and have a snake as a pet, but most sane people, apologies if that's you, most people, if they see a snake, get out of there, don't they? We do, absolutely. Because we get the picture. We're not meant to mix with the serpent, with the snake, with the devil. There's a difference between us. That's the distance God creates. But then he says something incredible. You might not get it at first. He says to the serpent, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. It's a bit enigmatic. What he's saying is, okay, devil, okay, serpent, one day this woman, this Eve, the human race will have a particular child who will crush you, who will defeat you. You have messed up the world with your temptations and your sin, but there is a child coming from this woman, from her offspring, who will defeat you, who will crush your head. And you will strike his heel. You will hurt him as he does that. Something will happen to him as he crushes you. It's a bit enigmatic, but it's still a clear promise. Right at the beginning, right as the world is messed up, God says, we're going to sort this. Someone's going to come and sort this. And that's the picture that our bit of Revelation is picking up on. So, if you see, verse 1, a great sign appeared in earth, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. I can't go into that picture. Again, it's an Old Testament picture that just means something incredible is happening. Draw attention to this baby that's being born. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Well, we know women cry out in pain. Why is it saying that? Because it's this picture. It takes you back to Genesis 3. Pain came in childbirth. We're back there at that moment in this story. But before this child is born, before we get a sense of him coming to sort it out, the camera switches around and you're straight on the serpent. But not a nice, cute, cuddly snake, as in the Old Testament. Now, he's unmasked. The full, true horror of Satan is seen. Another sign appeared in heaven, verse 3, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns at its head. It's horrible. Even at first description, you think that is gross. But the description tells you why it's gross. It's red, blood red. It's come to destroy and shed blood. And 7 heads and 10, they're numbers in the Bible, symbols in the Bible of completeness. So 7 heads, it's got complete brains and authority. 10 horns, it's got complete power. 7 crowns, it's got complete rule. This is a dominating, ruling, evil, nasty, blood-shedding beast. You don't want to cuddle Satan. Now, God said Satan would be defeated. God said a woman's child would come and defeat it. And now here's a woman giving birth. The picture, the language is, this is the one. So verse 4 continues, the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment it was born. So to stop this plan, to stop my head being crushed, to stop being defeated, I'm going to get that child, I'm going to eat that child, and job done, I'm still in charge, thinks Satan. It perhaps makes you think when Jesus was born, King Herod was evil and tried to kill killed all the babies who had been born. The slaughter of the innocents, it's called. Jesus was almost killed before he could do anything. But God rescued him, swept him off to Egypt. He was rescued and could live and then die on the cross and rise again. Now we know that's what happens next. We know Jesus was swept away, but then he grew up, he died, he rose again, he ascended, he went back to heaven. But we've seen that, we've heard that already in Revelation, so it's not told us again. It's all compressed into the end of verse 5. Her child was born, and her child was snapped up to God and to his throne. So that's all of Jesus' life, just sort of squashed up He was born and then God took him back to heaven. We know there's more to it, but he was protected. He's back with heaven in heaven now. Because the focus of this story now is the woman and Satan. Jesus is on his throne. Jesus is in heaven. He's in charge, ruling. He's on the throne. We get that. We heard that. We know that. The picture now is the woman, the church, and Satan. And the woman, verse 6, the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God where she might be taken off for 1,260 days. This is why I think as well it's not just a woman. She's been taken to the wilderness. Again, a picture from the Old Testament. I hope you're following. In the Old Testament, God's whole people went into the wilderness, went into the desert, lived there for a couple of years. And then we got told by God, you've got to live for another 40 years here. 42 years they lived and were looked after by God in the wilderness. Here is God's people, the woman taken into a wilderness to be looked after by God for 1,260 days. If you work it out, that's 42 months. 42 years they lived in the wilderness. God's people are going to live for 42 months. Symbolically, it's the same length of time. God is going to look after his people. If you've not followed it so far, here's the picture. Jesus is on the throne. God's people are in a desert place, a hard place, a tough place, but being looked after by God. Here is Satan. Here's the serpent. God's war with evil, we have the church, we have Jesus, and Satan. There's the description of the world. It's messed up. It's because of sin, it's because of the serpent deceiving the women that we've pushed God off the throne, we're in charge. But look, Jesus is on his throne. He's looking after his church. But here's Satan. Satan's war against the church from verse 7. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. Here's a picture of an almighty battle. God's angels are battling with the serpent with Satan. The battle is, who's going to rule? Who's going to be king? Who's going to rule the church? Who's going to own the church? The people, God's people. Are they going to be God's people? Are we going to be God's people or Satan's people? It's a battle for control between God and Satan. It's a battle that started in Genesis 3 when the serpent said, just eat the fruit. We'll push God off his throne. You can be my people. That's when the battle starts for people. And it just continues on and on. This describes the world. When the first people were judged, they were pushed out of paradise. God wasn't ruling them now. Satan was ruling. He was the boss. Just as Satan has ruled us, the devil has ruled us. If you're not a Christian, you won't think I'm a devil worshipper, but Jesus is not in charge of your life. Therefore, the Bible says Satan is. Satan's influencing you because he's not letting you, or you're not letting yourself worship God. But Jesus has died. All our sins can be forgiven. By Jesus, we sung about the Lamb. Jesus died on the cross. So that all God's anger at our rebellion, for us pushing him off the throne, he says, well, rather than me get angry at you, I will die in your place on the cross. So you can be completely washed clean, completely forgiven, bought back for God, to be God's people again, not pushing him off the throne, but saying, I'm forgiven, I want to worship you, I want you to be my king. And the church is God's community of people who say, I want Jesus to be king. I don't want Satan, I want Jesus to be king. But Satan, he doesn't want us to do that. He wants to be king. He wants his people back. He wants the church destroyed so he can rule the people again. So listen, or turn over to verse 10 and see what God says. Here's the war, here's the battle, and God says in verse 10, Now I heard a loud voice in heaven say, Now have come the salvation and the power, and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before God day and night, has been hurled down. The devil is called the accuser. It's like a court case. It's like the devil is constantly in court with God to say, these are mine. These people are mine, because look, they're people who push you off the throne. Let's see the evidence. Let's see what they've done. Let's see how they are sinners. They're mine. But God says, no. Jesus died to forgive them all of that. They're completely forgiven. Jesus is Lord now, so Satan, get out of the courtroom. You can't accuse them anymore. You have no evidence. They are not guilty because I've forgiven them by Jesus. So, verse 11, they triumphed over him, over Satan, by the blood of the Lamb. By Jesus dying, they can say, we've won. We're on God's side. Jesus has forgiven us everything. By the word of their testimony, we belong to Jesus. The Christians are there in the court case saying, look, we've been forgiven by Jesus. We're on Jesus' side. So therefore, devil, you cannot condemn us. You can't accuse us. We have been forgiven. We belong to Jesus. So we belong to Jesus. Nothing can pluck us from his hand. Nothing can attack us or defeat us. Satan, get out of the court. So we're told that the verse before this, the great dragon was hurled down. The ancient serpent was called the devil, the Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Get out of the court. You cannot accuse Christians anymore. They're completely forgiven. There is no evidence. There is no verdict, but not guilty, because Jesus has died for them already. So it's good news. If we're in heaven, it's good news. We're secure with Jesus. The devil can't get us. We are his. But Revelation is written, God has revealed, Jesus has revealed to us on earth because we're still in danger. The devil has been thrown out of heaven. There is no accusation for Christians. They've made it. They've trusted Jesus. They are safe. But he's on earth. For the people who first read this book, they had the Roman Empire breathing down their neck, trying to drag them away from Jesus. Christians faced death or torture or prison or execution or flogging or whatever. And this is written, Jesus is revealing to encourage them, keep going. The devil's going to try and pick you off. You're here on earth. Keep going with Jesus so you can join me around my throne. So verse 12, therefore rejoice you heavens, and you who dwell in there. You can rejoice, you are safe and secure. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows his time is short. The devil hasn't got much time left. One day Jesus will return and he will be destroyed. But now it's like he's thrown back. He's thrown back onto his back, but he's lashing out and crashing out and trying to grab the church. So verse 17, then the dragon was enraged at the woman, at the church, and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, the whole church, those who keep God's commands and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. The devil is seeking war against the church. Now look, if I talk today about the devil, there's two reactions. Some people in the world, some Christians too, will just obsess about the devil, be really interested in the devil, really focus on the devil, and then you focus too much and he's got you. But other people say there is no such thing as the devil. This ridiculous talk, what ridiculous sermon, Ian. There is no such thing as the devil. And then the devil's won as well. If we say he does not exist, if we're not wise to him, then we're not wise to his plans, his schemes, and the danger, he can have us in that way. But Jesus reveals so that we see the danger, we see the devil, we see his schemes, we see his plans, so we can watch out and keep clinging to Jesus. Satan is lying there, thrashing about, trying to grab the church. What does he do? What's his plans? What his weapons? We're told two of his weapons. Firstly, Satan's weapon, political powers. In chapter 13, there is a beast that comes out of the sea. Chapter 13, verse 1. The dragon stood at the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 crowns on its thorns, and on each head was a blasphemous name. Again, what's this? This is a weird picture. But again, it's an Old Testament picture, and the key is the sea. The sea was terrifying to Old Testament people. If you've ever seen the sea raging and roaring, if you've been on a cruise ship and you sail across that, you sway a little bit and sometimes it buffets you. But if you're on a little wooden boat and you set out on the sea, it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And so the terror of the sea became the picture of all things terrifying. It was a sign of chaos and destruction and pain and death. The sea, just the word the sea would fill you with fear. It became a nickname for the other nations, like we call Think of the Welsh, we think of, daffodils and spring onions. What are they? Leeks, yeah. And the Scottish, we think of thistles and stuff like that. Well, here, all the other nations are just summarised with one name, the sea. They're all the sea. They're the chaos, the evil, the terror, the horror, the chaos, the sea. So Isaiah says, woe to the many nations that rage. They rage like the raging sea. Woe to the peoples who roar. They roar like the roaring of great waters. So the beast of the sea is the powers of the sea sort of becoming personal, becoming a beast, becoming a figure, becoming human almost. So the powers that be, the political powers, are this force of the sea in political form, if you like. This beast, this enemy, gets his power from Satan. He is the force, the powers that be, the political enemies that God's people can face. So verse 2 says, the dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. So he's got satanic power, this beast, this political authority. Intriguingly, one of his heads is damaged. He's got these 7 heads, but verse 3, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. That seemed to me, takes you back again to the beginning, to that someone would crush Satan's head. Here's the head being crushed, but he's just got enough power to revive himself for one last sort of strike out. I can't dig into the details, but can you get the picture? All the powers that can affect Christians, all the political powers of the nations that can threaten us and harm us and kill us, here they are. So our politicians can affect us, can't they? Our politicians can pass laws that affect Christians. So they can put up laws about abortion or euthanasia or gender or marriage that we may, if we Bible-believing Christians, we don't like those laws. And if we say, actually, no, I'm not going to follow that law or obey you on that law, you can see how we're in conflict against the political powers. Political correctness can grab us and challenge us and hurt us and affect us. But that's just a hint of the beast's power. If you lived in North Korea today as a Christian, it's just flat out illegal to be a Christian. You're not allowed to be a Christian in North Korea. If you're a Christian there, you're arrested. If they find you that you've got a Bible, you'll be arrested. Sometimes you and all your family will be taken off to a concentration camp. Or they can torture you, or they can beat you, or they just kill you. They execute you because you're a Christian. If you lived in North Korea and read about this political beast, it would be clear. It's alive. It's there. It's the beast that controls your every movement, apart from you trust Jesus. This is Satan's weapon. Now, we don't need to fear Satan's weapon. What can it do to us? The worst the politicians can do is arrest us and in North Korea kill you in the end. But they don't win because Jesus has beaten death. He's defeated death. He's risen again. And he holds us in his hands and he's on his throne. That doesn't mean that Satan's weapons can't affect you and hurt you and damage you. It doesn't mean you won't suffer in this world. This is a formidable picture of the terror that can be unleashed on the church. And Satan has another weapon. Satan's weapon, false beliefs. Chapter 13 from verse 11. Here's a second beast. A second weapon that Satan uses against the church. Verse 11, I saw a second beast coming out, not of the sea this time, but out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb. Oh, a lamb. Lambs are cute. That's all right. And the Lamb of God is Jesus. Well, that's all right. He's not going to harm us. We've heard of Jesus in Revelation like the lamb that was slain. That's okay. This beast seems okay. Verse 11, I saw the second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It speaks like the devil. It looks like Jesus. It looks like faith, looks like religion, but it speaks like the devil. The picture here is of other faiths, of other beliefs, of other people worshipping God in different ways who are trying to stop you worship Jesus. They're saying, don't follow Jesus, don't worship Jesus. Believe what we believe. Here's a different version, a different vision, a different belief. Worship in our way. But that's just a hint of the beast. Because if you lived in North Korea today, your leader, Kim Il-jong, or whatever his name is, he's your God. He's the nation's God. You worship him. He is your religion. Everyone must worship him or die. It's the same in some countries in the Middle East or in Asia. You can't be a Christian. You have to follow the leader. The same was true not so long ago almost in Europe. Hitler wasn't just a political leader. He had a faith and ideology that Jews must die. And anyone who opposed him would die. It was a state religion. And isn't that what's been described here? This beast is like a state's religion, its beliefs. So verse 16, it also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands and on their foreheads. That's like a badge. A badge saying, yeah, I belong to him. It's like a football strip, the uniform. It's like, yeah, we're his. We're worshipping that God. What I say, what I think, what I believe is what he says and thinks and believes. And that's the badge. I'm going to be on this beast's side. If not, verse 17, so they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. It's carrot and stick this. The carrot is, if you play along, if you worship Kim Il-jung or Hitler or whatever, if you follow, you can trade, you can sell, you can buy, you can have a job, you can have promotion, you can make money. But it's carrot and stick. If you won't worship this leader, if you resist, you can't have a job, you can't work, you can't trade, you can't have promotion, you can't have your money. We'll take your money, we'll take your house, we'll take your life. Which many Christians know. In China today, the last few months, Christians have stopped getting promotion and started to lose their jobs. If they don't belong to the official controlled church, the state church, they're losing their jobs. It's happening today. The pressure is starting to happen in our country. Christians are losing their jobs. They put something on Facebook about not agreeing with some politically correct thing or other. They say, I don't agree with this. People have lost their jobs just for Facebook posts, private Facebook posts, for not worshipping the God of our age, the faith that we must believe everyone is right to choose whatever is right for them rather than right to choose Jesus as Lord. People are suffering because of this. So you can see these pictures in Revelation. At first, they're bizarre pictures of dragons and beasts, but when you start to understand, they describe the world. The world continually of different beasts and powers rising and falling and different empires, each impacting Christians in different ways. These are Satan's weapons. Satan is out to hurt Christians. Satan's war against the church, his weapons. But finally, the triumphant church in chapter 14. Look at the church. Look at her Lord, verse 1. Chapter 14, then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion. Standing. The Lamb, Jesus, he's not defeated. He's standing on Mount Zion. That's where the temple was. That's where God's throne was on earth. He's standing there on Mount Zion. Jesus is standing. Jesus is in control. Jesus is Lord. That's what it's saying. And with him, chapter 14, verse 1, 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Well, the beast said, you have to have my badge, but here's Christians with Jesus' badge, with Jesus' uniform, with Jesus' loyalty to Jesus. They believe in Jesus and trust Jesus. And 144,000 of them? Well, we heard that number a few weeks ago. It was a number, a symbolic number, a picture number of how God's people were complete, a complete number of God's people. It wasn't a literal number, it was a symbolic number of 12,000 from here and 12,000 from there and 1,000 built up to this massive number of God's people, the complete church. Do you see, Satan has roared. See, Satan has warred. Satan has used his weapons against the church. He's unleashed all his fury against the church. But the number is complete. They're all there. It doesn't mean Christians aren't affected. It doesn't mean they haven't lost their jobs or lost their money or suffered poverty. It doesn't mean the state hasn't rounded up Christians and persecuted and killed them and imprisoned them. It doesn't mean that they've not flogged them and tortured them, hurt them. It doesn't mean the beast hasn't caused their death. But whatever suffering Christians have or haven't faced, here they are. Every single one with the true Lamb, the Lamb of God, Jesus, standing with his people. Yeah, Revelation looks weird. But this is Jesus' revelation, Jesus revealing this all to us. So we understand this world. So we're equipped to face this world. So we can look out and be warned and see Satan and see his ways and his weapons and his attempts. We can see him trying to drag us away from Jesus. We can see his beasts. They never look like beasts. They're all dressed up beautiful and pretty, like the Bible calls them angels of light. Beautiful. But Jesus here unmasks them. He tears the beauty off and says, here are beasts. Here are dragons. Here is opposition. Here is his weapons, his plan, his game. Don't let the devil drag you from Jesus. Yes, sticking with Jesus may affect you. In some ways, in many ways, by sticking with Jesus, because the devil wants you, the devil wants to drag you away, sticking with Jesus will affect you. It may be in political correctness. Perhaps you believe something or think something that the state in the end says is unacceptable. It might mean you can't trade. It might mean you can't have a job. It might mean you lose promotion. It might mean you end up suffering. Your income may take a hit. Worse, you may end up in poverty. Christians around the world face that today. It might mean that one day our state starts to prosecute Christians for what they believe. For something we believe in Jesus or something we say because Jesus said it. We might be prosecuted. We might face prison. Christians around the world face that today. It might mean one day we get flogged or beaten or imprisoned or tortured or even death. Christians around the world face that today. It might mean another religion attacks us or challenges us. It might mean terrorism is something we face at the hands of another religion. It might mean another faith tries to convert you, or people of no faith, if atheism tried to unsettle you and drag you from Jesus. Christians around the world face that today. But Jesus tells us, Jesus reveals this to us, heaven's perspective, that Satan is at work. He wants to destroy us. He wants to destroy our faith. And Jesus tells us to bolster us, to strengthen us, so we cling to him. Lord Jesus, help us cling to you. Amen.